Hello, welcome to Emerging Form. I'm Christy Ashwanden.
And I'm Rosemary Watola-Tromer, and this is a show on creative process. Hello, Christy.
Hey, Rosemary. I just have to tell you, it's the time of year when I am totally obsessed with birds.
Yeah, ditto. If we're offering confessions, I'm going to go to the same confessional. What about them? What about them right now?
Well, first of all, I just love them. I love waking up in the morning and hearing them chirping. I am completely obsessed with my little bird feeder cam, which my friend Ben Goldfarb turned me on to. I just saw him actually at Mountain Words, and I was like, I want you to know, I blame you for my obsession with the bird cam. But it's so fun. I just really enjoy being able. The thing that's great about the bird feeder cam is that you can really observe them up close and what they're doing. It's so great. And I will literally be sitting there on the front porch and I can look over and see the bird at the feeder, but also watch it up close what it's doing. It's so great.
Okay, that is super cool. And I've been likewise obsessed with my Merlin app, listening to the songs of the birds and naming them and getting more and more attuned to what the different bird songs are. And in fact, it even made it into a poem I wrote last night. My mother has been here, and we've been totally geeking out together, listening to the songs and figuring them out. But it occurred to me how much easier it is to name birds than it is to name feelings. That was kind of at the heart of one of the poems.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's easier to talk about birds with your mother than how you're feeling, right?
This is it. That's a big part of it.
Absolutely.
So I love the interplay of the natural world and what it has to teach us about our own humanity, how we're evolving alongside it. And in fact, that's kind of at the heart of the book of our guest today.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Preston is a science journalist who contributes regularly to the New York Times and has written for Science, the Boston Globe, the Atlantic, Orion, Slate, Audubon, Discover, National Geographic, and others. She's a winner of the American Association for the Advancement of Science's Kavli Science Journalism Gold Award. Preston is also a humor writer whose work has appeared in outlets such as McSweeney's Internet Tendency, Parents, and Real Simple. And she was the editor of Muse, a magazine about science and ideas for kids. Her book is The Creature's Guide to Caring: How Animal Parents Teach Us That Humans Were Born to Care. Let's bring her on.
Welcome to Emerging Form, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
So for listeners who haven't yet read your book, will you tell us just a little bit about The Creature's Guide to Caring: How Animal Parents Teach Us That Humans Were Born to Care?
Yes, of course. So it is a journey through the evolution of parenting and caretaking on Earth across all kinds of animals, including humans. So, when I told one friend that I was writing a book about the evolution of parenting, he said, "Oh, are you starting in Mesopotamia?" And I said, "No, more like fish."
I love that.
So I actually go even farther afield than fish. There are beetles and other insects. There are other invertebrates. There are fish. There are amphibians, reptiles, birds, other mammals, and our own human ancestors. Yeah. So by looking at parenting and other forms of caretaking across all these species, I hoped to reveal something about how humans became the species that we are.
Yeah, that's so interesting. And I just love the wide array of animals that you included, all the different creatures. I love that you included bugs. That was
so many animals.
Yeah. And I also just want to give a little shout out. I am a dog lover, and I was so grateful that you start one of the sections by saying, "I want you to know there's a dog in this chapter and it does not die."
Yeah.
I am the person who's like, "Oh, there's a dog in this book. If it dies, I don't think I can read it."
I know a lot of people feel that way. And the dogs were in danger at the beginning of the chapter, but I didn't want anybody to get too, uncomfortable.
Yeah, no, that was a really fascinating section. Can you tell us a little bit about how this book came about, Elizabeth? You're a science writer. Was this something that just kind of kept coming up in your reporting? How did you decide, first of all, sort of on the scope of this book, but also just that, oh, I think this is a book and not something else?
Yeah, so as a science journalist, the areas that I most often write about are animal behavior and ecology and evolutionary biology. That's like
Mhm.
what I'm always drawn to, those
Yeah.
stories, and then also bringing like an evolutionary biology lens to the science stories I do more generally, just kind of
Mhm.
looking from that perspective of like how did we get here? It's kind of a storytelling science, and I love it
Yeah.
for that reason. So the idea of a book about the evolution of parenting had been with me for a while because, I was aware that there are so many parenting books out
Yeah.
there,
Oh, yeah.
shelves and shelves in the bookstore, right? But as far as I've seen, they're all kind of prescriptive, first of all.
Hmm.
And
Mhm.
secondly, they're not biological. Like there are some that are scientific, but they focus on more the psychology of parenting or anthropology. And no one ever seemed to be asking, like, what about other species? We're not,
Mhm.
we don't exist in a vacuum. We
Yeah.
are animals, and we're not the only parents. There are many, 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 as you know from reading the book, many other caretaking animals out there. So I wanted to bring this perspective of evolutionary biology to
Yeah.
the topic of parenting and human parenting and say if we take a broader lens and look at ourselves in the context of all these other species and all this history of our time on earth, what does that tell us?
Yeah, I love that sort of big picture approach that you
Mhm.
bring, and also just this idea that humans are just one creatures here in, all of creation, and that we fit into this bigger community, and what can
Mhm.
we learn from one another, as being different creatures
Yeah.
living in the world, trying to make a life here.
Yeah.
So you have this idea, this big theme, and
Mhm.
how did you end up saying, okay, this is the way it might look in book form? How did that happen?
Yeah. Well, as for deciding to turn it into a book, I have been thinking that kind of the next career thing I wanted to do was think about a book.
Mhm.
And, in 2020, I had my second kid, spring of 2020, not the
Uh,
ideal.
oh, geez, wow, yeah, what a
April
time.
2020. It was a time.
Oh, wow, yeah,
So that was a strange year of my life, and I wasn't working very much because we didn't have a lot of childcare
yeah,
for reasons you might remember.
yeah,
But at the end of 2020, I got an email from an agent who had read a feature story that I wrote online and liked my work and said, "Do you have any book ideas?" And I said,
mm,
"Well, I have this vague, not well researched, unformed idea about the evolution of parenting."
mhm,
And she said, "Let's talk about it." And we talked on the phone, and she said, "I like that idea. We can talk more about it when you're ready to work on a proposal." And I was like, "Well, I just don't really have time right now
uh-huh.
because I have these two
That's
kids."
relatable.
Yeah.
Everyone
So,
wants to write a book, we just don't have time.
right. Yeah, and with the kids, dealing
Yeah,
with childcare, it
yeah,
was, I had a couple days a week when I could try to work on freelance stuff when the kids were with
mhm,
my in-laws, and otherwise, I was on duty. So,
yeah,
ironically or fittingly, it was caretaking that kept me from
Yeah.
starting work on this this book about
uh-huh,
caretaking. And then in the middle of 2021, my mom moved to be closer to us and started helping with childcare. So we started adding in more other places for our kids to be. And I got back in touch with that agent and I said, okay, I'm
mhm,
ready to work on a proposal. So then we really started working on it. And I really started to see how this topic could be not just a vague topic, but my agent really pushed me to think about what is the message? What's a really big idea that we're going to take away from this
mhm,
and bring to readers that's of value to them?
Mhm.
mhm. So what was that big idea? Did you have a thesis? Like, how did you sort of narrow down, like, here's what I'm trying to say with the book?
Yeah, I definitely give a lot of credit to my agent because she pushed me through several versions of the proposal and was like, "No,
Mhm.
bigger, go bigger, like
Uh-huh.
be more
Yeah.
bold,"
Uh-huh.
which is so hard. And I don't know if everyone feels this way writing a nonfiction book proposal, but I felt like there was an element of almost BSing
Oh, yeah.
because I hadn't done the research yet.
Right.
I had done a little bit of research, but I haven't done all the reporting. So my hope and how I described it in the proposal was that from looking at all these species, one of the big takeaways would be that these tools that we and other animals have evolved for caretaking are really the foundation of a society and of our human society in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And I had seen mentions of this idea in some review papers and textbooks, and I hadn't seen it like explored really in depth or explored across, by synthesizing a big variety of species.
Yeah.
But I felt that probably there was there was something there. And then luckily, when I did do all the reporting for the book, everything just kept coming together in ways that I hadn't even anticipated. The more research I did, the more it all spoke to each other.
Oh,
That's
these different
exciting.
threads. Yeah, it was very exciting. I was like, okay, I was right. I think there's really this is a real argument. So that is the argument I made, that that these tools that we've evolved in our brains and our bodies build these larger societies, and that in humans they've come together in this unique way with our big ape brains to be the foundation for our whole human society, and that people who don't have kids are just as much part of this human family and just as much have this caretaking capability built into them biologically. So we express that in how we live together as a society, and not just by how we raise our own kids in our own households.
It's interesting to me that you're doing both the research or the science of it, and at the same time, you're living it, right? If you had these two children at this time, and in that most vulnerable stage when they most deeply need their parent and this community, as you already said, you had luckily your partner's parents, you had your mom coming in to help you. I'm just curious how much of the inspiration was coming from your own experience as a mom.
Yeah, I think my own experience helped drive the questions I was asking, but also maybe more like the empathy I felt, the connection I felt with these other species. When you look around and you see other animals caring for their young, you start to feel like, oh yeah, I've been there, when they're like trying to get the kid to go someplace, they're feeding the kid. I don't know if you've ever sat and watched like a robin's nest in the spring and seen the parents coming, and it's like, sometimes I see, robins will nest on our neighbor's balcony, and I can watch them from our balcony, and I'll see one of the parents come with a worm, and sometimes it sits with the worm on like a telephone wire for a minute, and it doesn't go all the way to the nest. And I feel like when I come home, like from an errand or from the grocery store, and I'm kind of sitting in the car in the driveway for a minute, and like no one knows I'm home yet.
Yeah,
I could still be gone. So it really made me relate to these other species. And I don't want to. Anthropomorphizing is always something we try to avoid, for better or worse. But I wanted to walk the line and not say animals are just like humans, but say, what do we have in common, and can we take a more empathetic perspective on what the animals are experiencing and see what we have in common.
I'm curious, Elizabeth, how you structured this book, and at what point, when did the structure emerge? Can you tell us a little bit about the structure that you did settle on and how that works, and also maybe a little bit about how you decided which creatures to include?
Yeah. So the structure, I'm like a big structure person. I like to draw pictures of how things are going to look and really see it visually and think through how to move things around. That's really important for me in my writing process. And this book went through, I think, 5 structures. So I think 4 of them were in the proposal process, and I felt pretty good about what I had at the end of the proposal, but I felt like maybe there was room for improvement. And then after I sold the book, the first thing that my editor asked me for was a detailed outline. And at that point, it had been a few months, since I had addressed the structure, and looking at it again, I had a couple of epiphanies about how it should be different. And then I felt really good about it. And my editor was happy with it too. And it did not change again. I did not have to move anything around.
Oh, wow.
while I was writing, which is great because I hate when you I hate when you have to change the structure after
Yeah.
you've written something. It's so messy and painful.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's much better if you get that whole skeleton in place and then start building on top of it and
Mhm.
give it a flesh, you know?
How did you figure that out? Like, what were sort of the pieces that you went through to sort of figure out? And you said you went through 4 during the proposal.
Mhm.
Like, how did that evolve?
Yeah, there wasn't a really obvious way to structure this book. You know, there wasn't a chronology. I didn't want to feed into the fallacy of when people think that humans are more evolved than other
Yeah.
animals, right?
Right.
Like that's not how biologists view it. Everything
Yeah.
that's on Earth now has been evolving for the same amount of time, and we all have ways of being that are successful for us.
Right. Yeah.
So I didn't want to structure it in like a, march of progress kind of
Right.
way, like
Yeah.
start with the
That would be
bugs and
bad.
go all the way up to the people. And
Yeah.
also I didn't want to lose people's interest because
Yeah.
in my other experience writing, I've come to feel that people really want to talk about themselves, you know? So anytime you can put in a mention of humans, I think that helps
Yeah.
hold people's attention. So what I ended up with was structuring it by concept.
Mhm.
So how I see it is that each chapter introduces a kind of animal and then uses that animal to illustrate a concept that's important for the evolution of caretaking. And then
Mhm.
I expand that concept to other species, including ourselves.
Mhm.
So one of the epiphanies that I had in that final restructuring was I had the highlighted animal in the first chapter was ancient Homo sapiens.
Mhm.
And then I realized the highlighted animal in the final chapter should be modern Homo sapiens. So we kind
Oh,
of
that's
come
great. Yeah.
full circle and we meet
Mhm.
ourselves in the end of the book with all this perspective that we've gained from the other animals. So yeah, it's a different concept
Yeah.
in each chapter, and I don't know if that would necessarily be obvious to a reader, but that's how I thought about it.
I'm really curious too about this idea that you had these 4 structures and then you walked away from
Mhm.
it for a while. And then
Yeah.
it was in this coming back and you're like, "Oh, now you have these
Mhm.
epiphanies."
Yeah.
Like,
Totally. Yeah.
"Oh, what if I put the past and the present together as the bookends?" But I feel like there's this ripening process that happens when we walk
Yeah.
away for a
Oh, for
while.
sure. Yeah.
What are some of the things besides this kind of time itself and the ripening, but what are other ways that you help yourself evolve a process, like through conversation with people, or
Mhm.
do you have other ideas about how to ripen a
Yeah.
process?
Well, I think of gnomes in my head. This is maybe weird,
Uh-huh.
but yes, I
Mhm.
just think of like that there's these gnomes. I don't know why they're gnomes, but that's kind of what I imagine living in like the back, like a back room in my brain. And I have come to trust that if there's some kind of little creative problem I'm working on, I kind of pass it back to the gnomes. You know, I'm like, this is your assignment.
Oh, that's great. I
I'm not
love
going to
it.
actively think about this
Uh-huh.
because sometimes when you actively think about it, you don't get anywhere. But, they're working even when I'm doing other stuff. And so if I kind of tell the back of my brain, like, I have this thing I'd like to figure out, I'm not going to think about it, but like you guys think about it. And then I just trust that when I come back later, maybe they'll kind of pass something back through the curtain to me.
Elizabeth, I love this idea of the gnomes. That's wonderful. I'm going to try and steal that. I've certainly had this experience myself of putting it away and just knowing that it comes back. But I love the idea that there's some other little sentient beings that are actually doing the work that are not AI.
Right. Oh, God, no.
Yeah.
And this idea that we have our partners, whether it's our marriage partner or our parents or friends or whoever we're talking to, and that allows for this kind of essential idea to shine forward.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
We're able to see, oh, that's what I wanted to say.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I was surprised how important conversation is for the creative process.
It
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
is. It really is. Elizabeth, there are just these, I don't know if people can see it, these just gorgeous illustrations in the book. And I wonder if you can talk a little bit about those, how you worked. I assume you worked with the illustrator, but can
Yeah.
you just talk about that whole process because they're just such a beautiful addition to the book.
Yeah. I'm so glad you asked about the illustrations. I knew all along that I wanted to have illustrations,
Mhm.
and I thought it would probably be, which is what it ended up as, one big illustration at the start of each chapter.
Mhm.
And it was just because I felt everyone likes illustrations, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Right.
adults like a picture book a little bit, right?
Yeah.
I thought it would be fun. And I thought what I wanted was to have illustrations that would reinforce the tone of the
Hmm.
book.
Yeah.
So what I wanted was something that would look at first glance kind of like an old-fashioned, ink illustration, like a naturalist's
Right.
illustration
Yeah.
out in the field. But then if you look closer, there would be a twist or like some more
Hmm.
personality to it or something surprising that was
Yeah.
happening. And I talked with a friend of mine, Marnie Galloway, who is a brilliant comic book creator. And we used to work together when I
Hmm.
was the editor of a children's magazine called Muse in Chicago.
Oh.
Marnie was our designer.
Hmm.
Absolutely amazing to work with. And I knew that she had so many great ideas and was extremely talented. And so we
Uh-huh.
talked about this, and she said, I can totally do what you want. I get it. Let me do it. So
Uh-huh.
I hired her to be my
Uh-huh.
illustrator. And first we brainstormed together. I gave her the manuscript, and we brainstormed what would be some good illustrations for
Hmm.
each of these chapters. And the ideas evolved because initially I had thought this animal that I was imagining as the initial, like the highlighted animal for each species, that would be the one that we drew.
Hmm.
But then as we talked about it, in a couple of cases, that really wasn't the best animal to draw. And I
Sure.
realized this thing is just an organizing principle for me,
Hmm.
the
Right.
highlighted
Right.
Yeah.
species, and it's not necessarily what's going to be most like salient to the reader. So we figured out what was the real best character to put on that opening
Uh-huh.
page. And then, we went back and forth with sketches, and we had some feedback from my editor and my agent as well. There was some discussion about how lifelike versus cartoonish they should be,
Hmm. Yeah.
because initially, I had told her I wanted it to be a little bit funny.
Yeah.
And so she had given them kind of like human-ish expressions in some
Uh-huh.
cases. And then my editor ended up pushing back on that and saying, I think they should look more realistic, like as
Mm.
realistic as possible,
Hmm.
so that the humor is kind of more subtle and we're not, um, we're letting the audience just notice it in a more
Uh-huh.
subtle way.
Yeah.
So I was really happy with how they ended up. And I know Marnie was most excited about the illustration for chapter 4, which is of burying beetles. And this was my suggestion, but I was like, I have this kind of insane suggestion for this illustration, because this chapter is the concept that it discusses is feeding. So
Oh,
feeding
yeah.
is the origin of caretaking. And I said, and I focus on these burying beetles. And I said, what about a burying beetle, Madonna and child? And she
Uh-huh.
was like, absolutely. So
So great. Yeah.
she created this for me. It's so unhinged,
Yeah.
and I love it.
I had
There's
actually
little like
bookmarked that. I was just looking at I realized I folded the page over there. Yeah, that's it's brilliant. And
there's
it's
like little dead mouse cherubs in the corners, and it's amazing. It's
that is so
ridiculous. Yeah.
awesome.
Talk about surprising. I mean, I feel like you walk this beautiful line really of science and humor. And maybe talk just a little bit about how do you marry these two things, and what is the use of
Mhm.
humor, and how are you able to use that to effect to help bring science to readers?
Yeah, I think a lot of my approach was really influenced by the time I spent right after college working at this children's magazine I
Mhm.
mentioned. So when I came into that role, this magazine was already well established, and it had this tone, which was irreverent, it was
Mhm.
goofy. Larry Gonick, the cartoonist, was a longtime member of this team, and he did a cartoon in every issue, and there were these cartoon characters which were in the margins, and they kind of were snarky, and they made little asides about what
Oh,
was
how
going on in the
fun.
stories.
Yeah.
So the philosophy of that magazine was that our readers, which were kind of middle school to high school aged kids, were intelligent enough to understand basically any topic.
Uh-huh.
We didn't talk down.
Mhm.
We didn't assume that they couldn't appreciate or understand something. It was, any topic that was interesting to an adult was potentially interesting to a Muse reader. And you just had to provide them enough context and enough background information to help them understand it. And, you also had to keep their attention. And so there was a levity to it and
Mhm.
a playfulness while also treating the subjects seriously. So that was how I really got used to writing and editing and thinking about stories early in my career. And I really carried that with me because as I was finishing up my time at Muse, I started blogging. That was in the big,
Oh,
the
yeah.
blogging heyday, and taking that same kind of approach, but trying to reach an audience of adults.
Mhm.
And I kind of came to this philosophy that there's not really a difference between writing for kids and writing for an adults, that every audience in nonfiction is just somebody who might have a different level of context for what you're
Mhm.
saying.
Yeah.
So you need to figure out where your audience is and meet them there with the information that they need to understand the story that you're telling. And every audience appreciates some playfulness and
Yeah.
some
Oh, for
humor.
sure.
A lot of adult science writing, I think, is not approached that way. It's often
Mhm.
very serious. And I think people think if it's a serious topic, you should have the appropriate like gravity in
Mhm.
your approach to it. But I've always felt that bringing some humor helps to get people emotionally invested, actually, that if you
Absolutely.
can touch all the emotional sides of a person, and not just say like, this is serious, treat it seriously.
Yeah.
And if you can light up that fun side of them, then they'll actually be more invested and more interested in what you're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I think we're running out of time here. It's been wonderful talking with you, Elizabeth. And for those of you who are paid subscribers to Emerging Form, you'll get to listen to us continuing this conversation because I know I have many more questions to ask you. Next week in our bonus episode, you can become a paid subscriber at emergingform.substack.com. Thanks so much for being here, Elizabeth.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be on this podcast, which I listen to and enjoy.
Oh, thank you. If you like our show, visit us at emergingform.substack.com, where you can find more, including show notes and back episodes.
There, you can also sign up for our bi-weekly newsletter or become a paid subscriber, which gets you bonus episodes every other week.
That's emergingform.substack.com.
You've been listening to Emerging Form. This is Rosemary Watola-Tromer, and my co-host is science writer Christy Ashwanden. Our fabulous audio producer is Cherie Turner, and our music is created and performed by Kira Kopostansky and edited by Leah Shaw. Kate LaRue designed our logo, and Jack Mueller, of course, inspired our work and the name of this podcast. As he always said, you must obey the poem's emerging form. Until next time.